Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to The Debrief, a weekly podcast from your friends here at Pastor Matt Brown Sandals Church. That's not the right way to say the order of those two things, but that's
You
that's okay.
slaughter the opening to this show in a new way every week.
It's something for the people. We do it. Hey, I am your friendly pal, the PRD, Justin Party, hosting alongside Pastor Matt, who's going to bring some real truth. We got some wonderful guests, of course, your lovely wife, Mrs. Tammy Brown.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back to the show, and Pastor Andrew Bogenwright.
What's up?
Right, the most solid jaw at
What'd you
Sandals
call
Church.
me earlier?
Thank you.
T Breezy. T Breezy.
I am anything but breezy.
No,
so
that's more of a prophecy. It's a God's call on your life. Pastor Andrew, last time you were here on the show, you were alongside Mrs. Tammy Brown.
It's kind of our thing now.
Reunion.
Yeah, you guys are pals. Hey, so we are continuing our series called You, working through the Enneagram, and today we are talking about the style of 6, the Loyalist. And Tammy, this is your primary style. So normally we ask Pastor Matt to share a few things that's important to know about the 6. Today we're going to ask that you would.
Yeah.
Give us that intro.
My primary style is a 6. I actually test like 99.9 a 6. So there's a lot of 6 in me for sure. The 6, the loyal person at their best, they're beautiful, is they can be prepared, strategic. We're motivated by staying safe and avoiding risk. So when we're healthy, we can assess risk really well and be prepared. I actually came up with a little phrase that without knowing it, and I was honestly saying this in a sentence to somebody: don't be scared, be prepared. It's just the way I think. But when we're broken, we're just afraid of everything. We're all going to die all the times. The risk looks like 7 steps to how we're going to die. The sky is falling. So yeah, that's the 6 kind of in a nutshell. We're very strategic, planning, prepared, or we're just scared.
I just got an update from producer Kelly. He's asked that we not say that phrase anymore on the show so we don't have to pay royalties to the Boy Scouts of America. Don't they say be prepared?
Yeah, but they don't say instead of being scared, be prepared. They don't say that. And they are no longer the Boy Scouts. They're just Scouts.
So
Scouts of America.
Okay.
Welcome to our world.
I didn't get to be a part of them.
Yep,
Yeah.
we're
I can
we're
go
sorry.
back now and be part of them, but I couldn't then.
That is awesome. Pastor Andrew, can you talk to us about, you have identified as a 6, and
Yes.
what does that look like for you in your life?
Yeah, so it's definitely my primary motivator, and it's been interesting to discover more about how I've always been. I was sharing with some people yesterday that I came to Christ when I was 4 years old, and I never thought about it until I did the Enneagram, that my primary motivator at 4 was probably fear. I probably heard somewhere that you don't get to go to heaven, or you're going to go to hell or something, if you don't accept Jesus. And so I made that decision at a young age.
It wasn't because you were stealing crayons, punching girls.
No.
What kind of sin is a
See,
4-year-old?
I was too afraid to do bad things.
Yeah, and I was
I didn't want to get caught.
That we weren't
Yeah,
doing that.
so-
Were you binging on glue?
Yeah. No, I
paste.
possibly.
Sorry,
Yeah.
paste.
Beating my little brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's always been there for me. My mom was a worrier, and it was just ingrained in me. And so it's really easy to recognize the sinful side of it. But what I also noticed is just I've been loyal to people all throughout my life. 2 of my best friends I became friends with when I was 5 years old. We met at the bus stop for kindergarten, first day of kindergarten. We're still friends 33 years later.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's just, ingrained in who I am as a person. And so, there's both the beauty and the brokenness, as we've talked about often, that I see there.
That's interesting. I've not connected that. My wife, Lindy, she's a type 6 for sure. Like, that is her number one thing. And her best friend, they've been best friends since they were like 3 years old, and now they're grown moms and still are besties. So
Yeah, that's cool.
When you talk about fear as being kind of a primary motivator, how does that kind of play out in your life? Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis in terms of you're not a kindergartner anymore, afraid of going to hell?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, it's my inner dialogue. I'm not afraid of things. Like, I don't feel like I'm a chicken. I'm not afraid to jump off a cliff into water. I'm not afraid I'm getting a car accident or plane crash or anything like that. It's the fear of messing up a relationship, fear of saying something wrong, fear of what I might do, the damage I might do in a relationship because of something I mess up on. So I have this underlying fear of making sure to get it right and not ruffle too many feathers, those kind of things. So I have to push that fear down often. I have to, suppress
Tammy
it.
has that too. Every time she speaks publicly, she's always like, "I'm afraid I'm going to ruin the church." I'm like, "No, you're not. You just we'll take it off the internet. It's fine."
Right.
I've had to, what that looks like for me is I do fixate and obsess on everything that might go wrong. And so as I've been working towards health the healthy part of this. I'm forcing myself to assess what could go right instead of always what could go wrong. The other thing for me is I am afraid of everything, like jumping into water, whether it's from a cliff of 20 feet or 2 feet. I hate it all the same. Like it's all the same, which has been interesting because Matt's favorite thing to do is go places and find cliffs to jump into water. So that's been kind of a tension for us. Good tension to have if that's
Water
one
is
of
a
our worst.
soft
There's
pad
sharks
to land
in
on.
there.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah,
going to
sure.
go wrong. I'm going to hit the rocks on the way down. But
Yeah, you can't see what's underneath there. I'm with you. That's stupid.
in my mind, I really do. I mean, I foresee potential things that could go wrong. And when I'm in a good space, that's beneficial to our family because I'm like, okay, we're going here. Here's the 10 things we need to get there that we're going to need while we're there. And then I'll throw in a couple things. Well, in case it rains, we've got the mini travel umbrella. And in case I car sick, I have the nausea bands at all times. And Matt doesn't have any of that kind of assessing.
Thank God she doesn't drive around without a shirt.
Matt doesn't have what if. The 6 has what if all the time. Or
Right.
what if this happens or this happens or this happens.
It's reminding me of in those new Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. where he like pauses everything and he kind of like freezes the world. That seems like a 6 thing. The ability
yeah.
to figure it
Except
out.
in his battles, he always wins. In Tammy's and Andrew's, they lose.
I'm
they die.
lying, dead, bloody on the ground. But that's funny. That's such a difference between us because I am afraid of me messing up, but I'm not afraid of engaging in like relational stuff. For me, it's car accidents, running out of gas late at night, the roller coaster at the fair coming off the tracks because the guy didn't put it together. I work through all of that, the things like that to go wrong. The what if.
So we've talked about some of the unhealthy things or maybe what's going on in your inner dialogue or whatever, but what does it look like for you to like say, I identify as a style 6 and this is how it is beautiful. This is how it's helpful and healthy in my life. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I can go first because I know them both very well. They're both very, very loyal. I can't remember when this was. I think we celebrated your 10-year anniversary at Untitled Church. And one of the things I said about Andrew and Becca, and I don't know that she's a 6, but
It's their second highest.
okay, it's their second highest, is I've never had to worry about them going wayward or getting weird on me. And so, staff, you empower staff, you give people authority, power, prestige, and a lot of people, it goes to their head. They think, we've had people like, I'm going to plant my own church. I'm going to go here. I'm going to do that. Andrew and Becca have never done that. They've been loyal to me. They've been steady. They've been true. And I can't tell you how important that has been in my life is I don't have to have a category for what if about Andrew because he's solid. He's steady. We referred to Andrew as kind of the ox of Sandals Church. He can carry a lot.
And it's not just about his fitness.
Yeah, well, he's very, very buff. But he literally is stable. And so I think that's when a 6 is super healthy. They are stable. That's one of the qualities that we need. And we all need more stability in our life. And a healthy 6 will provide that. The same is true as for Tammy. As Tammy, has been very, very stable for me. I would not call her an ox, but she's been very, very stable. She's reliable. She's true. She's someone that you can count on. And so I've never had to worry about her being gone or absent. And so she's very, very present, very, very here. And so I think for both of them, it's been a blessing. Now, I will say this. When Andrew and Tammy took the Enneagram, I was surprised that both of them were 6s. And it's because I think, I thought Tammy was a 2, and I probably would have thought Andrew was a 2. So I think Andrew has done a good job at minimizing how he expresses his fear when he's around me. So maybe he reserved that for Becca or someone else or his best friend since 4th grade. I don't know, or 4 years old. So, but I never knew that. And this is why I think it's so important to take this test because it's helped me when I ask Andrew and Becca to do things, I need to remember, okay, they're going to be afraid. What's the worst case scenario? What could go wrong? And so I need to give them some room to process that because I don't have that. God's right. I operate according to literally my heart. Here's where I see. Here's where I feel like God is doing. And I need you to do this and respond quickly because I'm a 3. So I have to give Andrew and Becca time to process their fears. And what I've discovered over time is they come to the right conclusion. It takes them a little longer to process and work through the what ifs than it does me. But I've had those on the front end. So with them. And so with Tammy, I've also had to learn to say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And I put it out there rather than here's what we're doing because she's always, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
I'm dinging that so I can come back and listen to that with Lindy.
Okay. Which
is
here's
what?
what I'm thinking versus here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Because doing instantly stirs fear. So rather thoughts don't. Okay, here's what I'm thinking, and I literally have to say it's not a decision. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm wondering if this would be a possibility, and it instantly lowers her fears. So we're getting ready to do a campaign in the fall. We're buying a couple pieces of property. We're going to be expanding some of our campuses and doing some things to handle the growth. And so I said, here's just a thought. Here's how much money I'm thinking about, giving to that campaign. Because I know her first thought is, oh my gosh, we're going to lose the house, the cars, the kids can't go to school. Like, we're going to die. We're going to be broken. There won't be any money in the bank. And so I have to just kind of put that out there so she has time, because she loves God. She's been a faithful tither to our church. She loves being generous. But, I need to allow her time to come alongside and say, okay, we're going to give that. We're going to do that. And it's been really, really helpful because, it's a 3, right? I'm like, here we're going. It's this or nothing else, and that's very, very scary for the 6. And so I have to give them time to come alongside.
One of the things when Matt and I went to our coaching, when we first really kind of got introduced to the Enneagram, is they likened us to, so Matt's primary style is a 3, and they said, Matt, you're the helium balloon. And on your own, you're going to float out into the atmosphere to do amazing things. But once you're out there, you're lost and gone from people. And so they said, Tammy, you're the weight tied to the end of that string, which at first I was like, I'm keeping him down. I'm holding him back. But what they said is, no, you're an anchor. You're keeping him from flying out into oblivion. And I think that even as I look back over Sandals Church, Matt's always been the one, we're going to do this big thing. And I tended to be more of the one that's like, okay, to make that happen, we need to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We need to make sure we don't do this because these things might, And so the way my mind works and his mind works are so differently. And I think that's the beauty that the 6s bring, is they figure out how to prepare for things and get them done. And, one of the things that's been so great for us in the Enneagram has been to some of the frustrations that we used to have with each other is, oh, why aren't you doing this? I totally do this. And so Matt and I just led a retreat for our executive team and some leadership at the church. And one of the things I encourage these couples to do, which is what I want to encourage everyone listening to do, is to say, okay, instead of what we were doing is we get frustrated with, Matt, you knew we're coming to Hawaii. Why didn't you pack your own sunscreen, lip balm, and hat, and all the things we need? I would get frustrated with him because those are the tools I kind of bring to the table of like, well, you should have brought your own stuff. I brought my own stuff. I came prepared. Blah, blah, blah. And instead, though, of thinking but what he brings to the table is he got us there. He dreamed to go there, which I would have been like, I'm too scared to go there. And how will it all happen? And we're going to die on the way.
And my bag always makes weight.
Yeah. And so instead of saying, why don't you bring the same tools to the table that I have, is saying, you bring all these tools, I bring all these tools, and now we have twice as many tools instead of repeated tools. And so to really look at, we each bring unique things to the table, and then together we have more of the things. That's what all relationships have. My kids bring some things to the table that I don't, but guess what? Now we have more things on the table with our styles. And so what the 6 brings is really important. I used to feel really negative about, like, I'm just afraid of everything. And Matt would say to me, just don't be scared. Well, that's like asking me to hold my breath.
Yeah.
Because being scared is what I do. It's who I am. And part of that has saved us from some things. Hey, let's slow down. Let's think what could happen. But I've really through this process come to embrace the things about me that I bring to the table that are necessary. So that's my answer to that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
I don't remember what the question was, but I was thinking about how 6s...
We're clearly not 5s. I used all the words.
Yeah, we focus on safety and lack of risk. And, when you're serving God, God isn't about safe things. He's always about adventurous and difficult things where we need him.
He doesn't play it safe.
Yeah, we need to step out in faith always. And so my journey has been one of feeling fear on the inside and choosing faith on the outside. And it's really been a 20-year journey of really understanding that and beginning to pursue things that require courage rather than just sitting in a very safe place where I know where everything's going to be at, and I know everything's going to be safe and secure, and really going, okay, God, what do you want to do? And even my recent move to being marriage and men's pastor was not safe. Being a Woodcrest campus pastor was safe. I knew how to do it. I knew how to be successful there. I knew everybody there, and but God had other things in mind, and so it's just important for sixes to really step out and go, okay, God, what do you want to do? Not what feels comfortable for me, but what do you want to do with my life? And so that's been my journey.
And I would say if you're a six, and I know not everybody that listens to the debrief goes to Sandals Church, and that's fine. If you're sick, it's really sick. If you're six, it's really important that you find a healthy church and a healthy pastor, because what would have been very disruptive to Andrew and Becca's life would have been a pastor that inflamed those fears rather than settled those. Over the years, I think that they've been able to trust, follow, and it's just so important, because if you're already afraid and you already don't trust people, and then you're around especially leadership who are not trustworthy and not reliable, it's going to magnify the unhealth of the six and make you consumed by your fear rather than following your faith. And that's why we said, I think the prayer at the end, I said, Lord, help me to follow you and not your broken leaders when they mess up or screw up. And so that's just really, really important in the six. And I think it's helped Andrew here over time to really trust and follow and build that. And he's an amazing, amazing guy. They're an amazing power couple. But it's interesting, you're a six, but you guys have adopted, which is very scary. I mean, that's scary to me.
Totally. It was one of those things that God wanted me to be courageous and do. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, that's incredible. So, I mean, a healthy six can take courage, can have courage.
We're supposed to be pursuing it all the time.
It's not as easy as the other numbers.
Right.
But here's what I think makes Andrew and Becca such amazing adoptive parents is the worst case scenarios were already played out in their minds before they ever made the decision. Whereas a lot of adoptive parents, it's the best case scenario, and then they're surprised by the difficulty. And I think that's why Andrew and Becca are such amazing, amazing parents to their boys, because they're in it, man. They're in it. They baptized themselves with fear before those boys ever showed up. And so, all parenting is difficult. Getting a child that's been developed, loved, or not loved by others for a couple of years of their life is extraordinarily challenging and different. And so I've just been so proud of them. The same thing is true as Tammy. Tammy is terrified by public speaking and has not wanted to do it. And I've actually kind of banned it a couple of times. I've said, we're done.
He doesn't like
I don't like pre-teaching Tammy. I'm just like, this is over. I don't care. People can go to hell. I don't care. I don't care.
That's better than living with her.
I'm in hell right now. But, here's what people have said is, and we have a lot of gifted women speakers at our church. We are loaded with great communicators. But I've had women that I respect and love in our church, and they've said something like this: when Tammy is herself, she's the best speaker I've ever heard. So when she can work through her fear and she's confident in who God is and the message that she has, she is a weapon for God. And the same thing is true, for Andrew. When Andrew feels safe and secure and confident in who he is in Christ, right? He is a weapon to be reckoned with. We just were in staff meeting for those who are listening, and we were challenged that the church is to be offensive, and that's not like you offended me, but we're not to just simply be on the defense. We're to be on the offense and moving Christ forward. And sixes can do that powerfully, when they're able. You think about Peter. He's a six, but he got out of the boat. He got out of the boat. He denies Christ by the fire with a girl who questions him on the night of Christ's trial, but he again is two. It's him and John that are close. Everybody else is gone. So that six is right there. It was scary. Peter's probably a counterphobic six, which we'll get into that, because he's the one who slices off the ear of the priest. So when unhealthy, a counterphobic six can attack what they're afraid of. And so Peter does that, right? Oh, here come the soldiers. I'm going to help Jesus. I'll cut off his ear. And Jesus, of course, heals the ear because he's Christ. So I just think sixes are so amazing. And again, so many people, and that's why I'm trying to pick the characters I am, because I think people are automatically going to think threes and eights are always the leaders. And it's interesting, Saul was a 4, who did I pick for the 5? My mind. Nicodemus, right? Clear leader. Peter's the 6. And this next week, you're going to be blown away. And then the 8 as well. And then 9s. They're all in positions of leadership. And so you can be anything, and if you're healthy and be in leadership. You can also be in leadership and be unhealthy, but it's going to be bad for you and everyone else.
So one of the things I appreciate the encouragement, by the way. It's really helpful. And I was thinking back at how much you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. There's a lot of times where I was fearful about my own leadership, and you're like, you can do this. I believe in you. You asked me to be the Woodcrest campus pastor. I would have never selected that for myself. You've encouraged me.
How scary was that? Our first campus
It
ever.
was really scary. Yeah,
it
was scary. It was hard work, but it was one of the greatest things for me because I had to really trust in God. And I think it's helped me work through a lot of my insecurities because people like you have believed in me and even extended big responsibility that I wouldn't have thought, oh, I can't do that. So, I think it's really important to encourage sixes, like you said, that you can do it. You're strong enough. You're able, and it's been really helpful.
For the six, one of the things that the Loyalist is always doing is questioning. They question everything because uncertainty provides insecurity and doesn't feel stable. And if our primary motivation is security, then we want real answers. And so by questioning everything, we question authority. But one of the things is we question ourselves so much too. And so am I doing it right? Am I good enough? Am I, but the questioning when we're healthy is to provide security for ourselves and others and to get that trust, because untrust and not being safe is our biggest fear. It's what we fear the most in our fear. And so the questioning others. And so when you do, like you're saying, when you do come along and help us to answer our own questions, maybe about ourselves, is such a good thing for the six, for the loyal person, to say you are, to speak the truth, because truth is the most stable thing, right? Even if it's hard, that's one of the things is people will tell me, because I value truth so much, I can handle really hard truths, not because I like them, but because then I know that I feel secure in understanding what the real situation that I'm dealing with is. And so that's one of the things is that speaking truth provides the security. And when people speak truth to us, even when it's hard, it helps us make sense and feel stable. Like, okay, well, now I know what to actually deal with. And when you speak truth, that's about the beauty. Like you can do this. I believe in you. It helps us answer those internal questions. So speaking truth and speaking the positive is so important to do for the people, for the sixes in your life.
Okay, I want to talk about these internal questions.
Okay.
You said something not to me. I think maybe I asked the question during our Enneagram training, and it was the most helpful thing that I have heard about sixes. And it's really transformed the way that I try and think about who Lindy is. But you talked about what it looks like to be asking the question, where am I? And I was really confused on that. And you talked about how you're always asking that question. Can you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, sixes are usually like in the heart triad, which is like the twos, the threes, the fours. They want to know, who am I? And they're motivated by figuring out, who am I in life? For the 5, the 6, and even the 7, which is the thing, we are primarily motivated by thinking. We think through things. We spend a little bit more time in our head than in our heart. We have to connect the two. But we tend to ask the questions, where am I? Because where am I, that's the stability. But we do that with relationally. Like, where am I to you? Am I a close friend? Am I not a close friend? Am I someone to speak into your life, not into your life? Because the where am I provides security and understanding our place in the world. It helps answer our place in the world, I guess. I don't.
That's great. I mean, I'm learning as I'm hearing from you. So I agree.
The where am I provides certainty and clarity. And like I said, the loyal person, the 6, truth, clarity, certainty, security is everything where we get our grounding from. And whenever that's off even a little bit is where we tend to start falling or dipping into those broken numbers. That's one of the things that so many people have been asking me in regards to the Enneagram in general is, oh my gosh, well, I'm a 99, whatever, unhealthy, everything. And for everyone out there, I'm unhealthy in like 7 of the 9 styles. So that hopefully encourages everybody. But
me too, sister.
Here's what I say about that brokenness. that's not where you live all the time. It's where you go when you feel at risk, unsafe, insecure, not loved.
Yeah.
You don't live there all the time. And so a lot of people have said, I'm so, come like, oh my gosh, I got my scores and I cried. I was so upset. I'm not okay. I'm so unhealthy. Well, we're all so unhealthy sometimes when we feel at risk and we're trying to figure out whatever's making us feel unsafe, or when we don't feel loved. I mean, all of us, no matter what your style is so motivated to find love. And so when you don't feel loved, you're going to whatever those things are, grasping for it in a way that you're not meant to. So to everybody listening, no matter what your style is, you're not just the sum total of that unhealthy score. You go there sometimes for sure, but that's not the sum total of who you are. And you cannot, even like for us with the 6, like we cannot say we're just afraid. It's not who we are all the time. It's who we are sometimes. But to embrace the beauty that you bring to the table, the good things, the helpful things. It's one of the things I love so much about the Enneagram, which I think I probably said on the intro week, was it takes every style to make this big mosaic of humanity work, which God clearly knew. And without the 6s, we would be getting to destinations and have nothing we need when we get there.
Right.
Right? We'd be getting to the equator and not have our sunscreen with us.
Okay,
So,
if you're married to a 6, if you're coworkers with a 6, roommates with a 6, in relationship with a 6, pause right now. Just back up 3.5 minutes and listen to that again. It's so helpful. It's so helpful. Well, we got a bunch of questions from people who are in our church who are 6s or in relationship with 6s. And you actually talked about how probably the majority of people would fall in that style of 6.
Yeah, I believe it's over 40% of the population that takes the test as a 6. So think about that. There's 9 styles, and 40% of them identify as a 6. So it's huge, huge. So that's why, right? So think of America. We're the most powerful nation on earth, and we're terrified of North Korea, which has an economy less than New Delaware. Right? I mean, and so to put that in context, California, New Delaware has half the population of like San Bernardino and Riverside. I mean, it's really small. But we're terrified, right? Because this guy might fire one rocket. That's just who we are. And not that that's not scary. It's just we're dominated by, we're this elephant, and there's, I don't want to say a tick on the ground. There's this mouse, and it's just like, just squash it. But we're frightening.
Right.
So
one of the things that's interesting, a lot of the questions, as you guys can imagine, are going to identify with maybe I'm afraid, this kind of thing. Well, hold on a second. God has put this in people as beautiful, right? And
healthy fear is beautiful.
yeah, let's talk. Can we talk about that really quick? Why would God say, hey, 40% of the people, this is like the core thing that I'm going to
okay, so remember, sin is an exaggeration or a diminishment of something. So oftentimes the 7 can diminish fear and act stupid and reckless. We're going to get into that this week. So the 6 will maximize, or what is it? Diminish or exaggerate. There's the word I was looking for. So they'll exaggerate it, and so it becomes magnified. So healthy fear is reverence. That's the word I think we're looking for. That's the godly word is. So reverence is, so they used to call pastors reverend. We don't do that anymore. We have no reverence for anything. You look in our culture, people, and regardless of what you think of Trump, if you're a Christian, you do not love God if you just randomly espouse hatred verbally towards the office of the president. That is unchristian. We should have reverence for God, for those in power, for those who are above us. We should appreciate those who serve and watch over us. That's just a Christian principle. You may not like it, but you probably don't like many Christian principles. So just add that to your sin list.
I can think of a few.
Yeah. So the exaggeration of reverence is fear, anxiety, trepidation, right? So, but the diminishment of that is, right, I'll tell God what I think about him, or if God wants to send me to hell, who does he think he is, right? It's this complete blindness to, I should be afraid of who God is. I love C.S. Lewis and how he writes in his series, his famous children's book series, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Chronicles of Narnia. But in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when they encounter the lion, the little girl's afraid to meet the lion, and she says, is he scary? And the beaver says, of course he's scary. He's a lion, but he is good. And so reverence is, yep, God's scary, but he's good. And so again, that's one of the confusions in our modern society. This whole I don't know how you say it. We're enamored with Mother Nature. Mother Nature is powerful. I don't believe it's a conscious, intelligent thing, but we use that term Mother Nature. Mother Nature is powerful. She is not good. She is not moral. She is not. God is powerful and God is good, and God has created the powerful nature. And again, so we just need to remember that. So I think that that's what God has put fear in us, and it is a pathway to understanding and appreciating who He is.
Totally.
Another word for it is awe. Bethel has a song, may we never lose our sense of wonder. Like we've lost the awesomeness of God and the wonder of God, and we're not wowed by anything. And I would say that's the greatest challenge facing young people today, is they're not awed by anything. Everything's boring. Everything's fun. Like I watch my son, he physically cannot just watch a movie. He watches a movie and he plays video games. Like they're just not into anything. It's just, it's a trip. So it's really, really hard because they're, constantly checking out everything else. So
yeah. You always talk about how Tammy's a truth teller and she's got like a great judge of character. Pastor Andrew, and for you, like in one of the darkest seasons of my life, we were most relationally close at that time.
Right.
I'm taking steps to leave ministry and my wife with a newborn child. And you really were telling me truth and really reminding me of what I could hold on to and helping me see the goodness in all those things. I think it's really interesting, for somebody who's listening that's a 6, you're not just a 6 because the world is crazy and because the news is that
God
way.
has made you that way.
Right. God has made you this way I think really to help hold people to what is good, right, and true, right?
Well, and they have a healthy fear of judgment and a healthy fear of God. Most people don't have either. And so that's why a 6 brings that to the spiritual table of we need to get this right, because ultimately, you're Andrew. Ultimately, you are going to be held accountable by God. And I get that right now your marriage is rough. All of those things are true. However, what's scarier than that is facing an almighty God and you just abandon your wife and child. Like that, right? Nobody gets that message anymore. Nobody hears that anymore. Everybody's like, follow your heart, follow your heart. And the 6 reminds us, follow almighty God, because it is a terrible thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Like that's one of those memory verses, if you're a 7, you run from. You don't want that verse, but it's real and it's powerful and it's true. Because oftentimes in the pursuit of our happiness, we invite misery to those that love and need us. And I'm going to go ahead and tweet that because you missed that.
Well, and I'm so thankful that God made me that way, because there's a lot of seasons in my life where I didn't tank because I had that awareness of, God's watching, He's involved, He cares about what decisions I make, and that was just ingrained. It wasn't something I necessarily sought after. It was just something that He gave to me as a gift.
Yeah, and all the numbers are a gift, and the 6 is a gift. It's a gift that God has given you. So we've talked about, you and Becca, you said, so is she a higher 1 than 6?
Yeah, 1 than 6.
Okay, so if you're 2 6s married to each other, you remember, so most of us, opposites attract, but sometimes when we have so much in common, right? You hear that when people are dating. That's good, but the downside of that is you have the same blind spots. So you have the same strengths, but you have the same blind spots. So you're going to have to surround yourself with some other people, so diversify the numbers with which you roll with, right? And have some other people who can see some things that you can't, because 6s can get real unhealthy real quick if they're married together, because they're literally just will pull back from the world because it is scary.
And there's an example of that. I mean, when we went to adopt our first son, Kingston, he was 7 years old. And so it was presented to us as this option. And we're like, I don't think we can be, we're both sort of like, we can't be parents to a 7-year-old. We're not even parents yet. And we took it to you guys in small group, and we're expecting everybody to be like, nah, don't do it. That's crazy. And everybody went one by one around the circle and said, yes. This is what God's calling you to do. This is what He wants you to do. And we were just so thankful to have people surrounding us that would push us into risky waters and be willing to take that.
That's just a great advertisement why you need to be in healthy community group. So my favorite line that night was actually by Dex. And he said, so Dex is our creative lead here at Sandals Church, but he said, there are very few times in a person's life when you get to be the hero. And this is your time. And it was just powerful. And I remember, you guys got to be a hero in Kingston's life. And that's just so amazing. Like, and that's who Jesus is to us, right? He's our hero. While we were yet sinners, He died for us. So he's our hero. And when we get to do those things, man, it's a big moment. And so, but there were other numbers in the group that had to speak. So that's funny to me. If as a 3, I would have shown up to the group assuming that everyone's going to say, yes, it's the greatest idea because it's mine.
Yeah. So one thing, real quick,
go ahead. Yeah.
one thing you said was 40% of the population is a 6. Now, I've had a hard time finding any other men who are 6s.
Yes.
I've met a lot of women who are 6s. And
Men are liars.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe at least as a primary, because fear isn't like a popular thing to have, like as a guy. It doesn't make you sound really tough. Do you have any thoughts on that, Matt, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 40% are now. Probably more are women than not. But certainly, I've prayed with and counseled many men after this weekend services who said, "Man, I'm a 6. I'm a 6. I'm a 6." And so a lot of guys are 6s, and fear is something that racks both sides of us. I'm sure. Anti-anxiety medication is probably doled out equally between men and women because when you follow that rabbit down that hole, it leads to you're completely racked and wrecked by anxiety. And so that's what I would ask a guy is fear a part of your life? I would say, tell me about your anxiety.
Right.
Tell me about what's going on with you. I talked to a young lady this week at church, and she struggles deeply with OCD. If you don't know what OCD is, it's obsessive compulsive disorder. And so she was talking about that and how, remember, the struggle of the 6 is believing themselves. And so she was talking to me about her disease and what she's struggling with. And I said, have you always had the disease? Which I assume the answer is probably no. And it wasn't. I said, when did it occur? And she said, when my mom and dad divorced. And what happened is her dad left the home, and she was the oldest sibling, and she felt fear because, right, the man has just stepped out, and now I'm the oldest, and I have all these siblings, and that's when it began. And this was interesting. So the 6 struggles believing themselves. So here's where the OCD person relates to the 6. So they know they've locked the door. They know they have, but they don't trust themselves. So they get up and they check over and over and over again because they don't believe that they did it right. And so, right, and that's not in all cases, but that was her issue: locking the doors, making sure the doors were locked, making sure everything's done right.
Well, she had an exaggerated pressure to keep things safe.
Right. At an age when that should not have been her role, it should have been her dad's, who, by the way, called himself a Christian, right? And it's just tragic when Christian men and women do things contrary to their faith. It wrecks your kids. And divorce always wrecks your kids. And I'm not saying everybody's, it's not your fault, but it does wreck your kids, and it certainly isn't their fault. So I encouraged her, counseling is focused on, the OCD and giving medication to limit that. I said, go back to your counselor and talk about the wound. I said, I'm not promising that your OCD will go away, but I do believe that it will get better as you begin to address that hurt. And it's not right for you to have to be in charge. That's not right. You should have been in high school having fun. You are not the protector of your family. And so for anyone out there who's suffering, here's what I would encourage you to do. Try to find the wound. Where did the hurt come from? Where is that hurt? And as you begin to heal that, the exaggeration of your sin, of your struggle, and remember, we all have the core sin. So the core sin of the 6 is going to diminish. The core sin of lust, the core sin of fear, the core sin of pride. It's going to diminish as you begin to work on that wound. But until you do, man, you can cover the pile of crap with all kinds of incense, but man, it still stinks. And so you've got to get at that wound. And that's not to say that every disease or every problem can be signed by addressing that. But I'm saying this: a lot of our problems can be helped when we pursue healing. And so we talked about that, do the work. We talked about that over and over again this week. Do the work. This is hard, but do the work. The Lord your God is with you. Be courageous. Do the work. Man, this is scary. Do the work. And so don't be afraid to do the work. And so a lot of us, right, well, this isn't working. And, when I was really, really, I think, losing it in my mid-30s with anxiety, depression, and overwhelmed with fear, I was looking for the instantaneous healing. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to pray once at church. Everybody's going to anoint me with oil. The problem was I had to deal with my wounds. And once I began to address those wounds, my struggle and my anxiety began to diminish. But you've got to go back to that wound and do that work rather than looking for the quick fix. So I'm all for medicine. I'm all for medication, but do the work to try to deal with your anxiety, to try to deal with your depression, to try to deal with whatever it is that you're facing. Do your part and ask God to do his part.
Okay, so let's get a question from Nick, who identifies as a 6. So this is perfect for you.
Yes.
What's up, dude?
Question about loyalty. He says, I'm a 6 all the way to the core, and I'll be honest, I was a little afraid to hear the sermon. Throughout my life, I've been
Same.
lied to time again. I've been cheated on multiple times, and there are points where I feel like trusting others and being loyal is more of a burden than a gift. My question is, how do I hold on to that loyalty when it seems to harm me? How do I honor God? How do I honor the gift God has given me in the times when it feels like it hurts more than it helps?
Yeah. So let's go back to I've been cheated on multiple times. So that's something you can control. Your selection process is broken. So how long have we been together, Tammy? 24 years?
Yes.
Have you ever cheated on me?
But no.
Okay, there we go.
Wow,
So
that would've been
one and
awkward.
done. One and done. No, man,
like,
she's afraid to cheat.
Yeah.
Come on.
Okay, well.
Exactly. Oh, totally.
Her 7 score is in the negative. So here's what I would
hate
say
that.
is, see, people are upset with the life that they have. Who's living the life that you're upset with? It's you. That's why Luke 7:23 is so important. If any man or woman would come after me, let them deny themselves, pick up their cross, and follow me. The best way to change your life is to die to yourself and give it to Jesus. So, Nick, what are you doing that is drawn to unhealthy people, that are drawn to broken situations? And here's the thing I see over and over again. As Christians, we're called to ministry. We're not called to date ministry or marriage or marry ministry. And I see this all the time. Good people that marry very, very broken people. And man, it's okay to love people from a distance, pray for them. You don't need to marry them. You don't need to get in bed with them. You need to let them get with Jesus. And that's where they're going to heal. A lot of people have a savior complex. You're not the savior. Jesus is. So step back. And that's what I would say. So he said, so he's been cheated on. So I would say, go to counseling and let's work on that. Let's work on that right there on what it is that you're picking, because you're selecting from a group, and Nick's a guy. Most women are pretty faithful. So you've got a better chance of finding a faithful woman than you do as a woman finding a faithful guy. So you are extraordinarily drawn to women.
Well,
cheat.
go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Nick, sometimes our fear keeps us from believing that God has great plans for us and keeps us from believing that God would have someone out there for you that's really great, and so we're willing to settle for people that
okay.
are not at that level because we're afraid maybe we're not good enough. Maybe they wouldn't love me if they were that great. And a lot of the people I dated, I was sort of being the hero, the savior. I didn't pursue them. They pursued me because they were needy, and I liked that. Some of my two-ness came out in that. And Becca, man, she was way out of my league, and I pursued her, and God had great plans. Is way
didn't say it.
outpunted my coverage is what
Yes.
people have said. So
Tammy doesn't
no idea
understand your
what that
football
means.
term.
yeah, it's a sports analogy. She's
You and
way
me
better
both,
than
sister.
me, is what I'm
Okay.
saying. But just trusting that God had a great thing for me, and she's amazing. And so to not give up, because your loyalty is a gift, and there's some great woman out there who's going to benefit from that if you're willing to wait and really find someone who has that quality.
Yeah, and some people
God
don't
has.
appreciate loyalty. They take advantage of it.
Yep.
Well, that's what I was going to say is for so many years for me, I was so hyper focused on being loyal, and I believed that my loyalty would be enough to make someone else be loyal. Instead of loyalty is about who you are. I mean, I just got to teach on this and cultivate that the loyalty of another person doesn't determine our lovability. And for so many years when I was, I would fixate, when we first took the Enneagram, Matt and I both thought I would be a 2. And here's what I learned. I behaved like a 2. Like, I'm going to do everything for you to get your loyalty because I value loyalty so much. So I was actually the one that was all out of sync in what I was looking for in friendships. It was very self-serving, and I've grown into a place where I'm really, I enter a lot slower now, and I look for loyalty that already exists outside of what I do for them. And I think that when in our brokenness, we're so afraid that we're not enough, that we're not asking, are they enough? On the front end, if that makes sense. So I used to say, I'm always so afraid people don't like me that I forget to ask myself, do I like them? And then
Oh, believe me, we've had
I'm identifying with everything you're
hours
saying.
and hours talking about this one. I'm like, that person's an idiot. Why?
yeah,
are you
This is great
but
stuff,
I
Kim.
get so afraid that I'm not living up that. And so that's what I would say for him is to enter a little slower. Because what he's trying to do is prove he's enough, prove he's worthy, prove he's so good because he's afraid he's not. Then to believe that he is and trust that he is, move slower and look for someone who's loyal because that's who they are. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Because that's what we want is loyalty is who we choose to be. Now, after I taught that, a lot of women at Cultivate were like, you know what? I'm in this really abusive relationship, but you're right. I'm staying in it because I'm loyal. I'm like, that is actually not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is we don't determine that we're loyal or not based on other people. We need to be loyal. We don't need to be ridiculous and have no boundaries and be abused. We don't live by, well, you were unloyal, so now I'm unloyal too. Like, we need to be loyal because that's who we're meant to be. And we need to be looking for people who have that same quality, not hoping that if we're just good enough, then they'll be it, which is what I did for years. And when it didn't go right, I was devastated. And so we need to move a little slower, Nick. Move a little slower.
Yeah.
Look for the qualities of someone who's loyal before you start moving in.
Yeah, and let me just say this, Nick. If you're doubting who you are, what you're going to do is not be yourself in the dating process, and so you're going to fool both yourself and the person you're dating because they're going to fall in love with something you're not, and then eventually they're going to go, oh, this is not who I thought you were.
Sorry, Lindy.
And so they're out of there. So you have to be real on the front end so that you can experience the blessings of loyalty on the back end. And so that's the problem with so much of dating today is we're all fake, and then we wonder why. We're like, how did this happen? Well, you're fake. I was fake. We both got married.
You can only keep that up for so long.
Yeah, at some point you have to be real. You're going to be you. Nobody can fake it forever. So, okay, there was some more good stuff in there.
No, that was good. Let me ask you this question about being courageous from Alex. He said, for most of my life, I saw myself as a failure and of no value, and I've always struggled believing that I have talent and skills, and that so I think that proved me right. I can now see my life has been ruled by fear and anxiety, and that I am gifted by God. My problem is that I'm continually drowning myself in a woulda, coulda, shoulda of my past. How do I deal with regret and choose courage in the future?
Yeah, so, man, you got to bury the past at some point. It will haunt you. I play woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's my favorite game. It just, all that does is it destroys the present and robs you of the future. So you just have to look at your past, be honest about it, learn what you can, and move forward. The Apostle Paul says, there's one thing I do, I forget what lies behind, and I press onward towards the goal that is in Christ Jesus. The Apostle Paul had a lot of regrets, had made a lot of mistakes. So you are talented. We are all talented, but we are not all equally talented. That is one of the great lies of American culture. We are not all equally talented. And so one of the reasons we become miserable is instead of being grateful for the talent we receive, we envy the talent that God has given someone else. So what you need to do is you need to be thankful for the talent you've received and be a faithful steward of the level that he's given you. You know, we had a speaker today at our staff meeting, and he said something that was just so important. And you're going to hear me say this over and over again because I'll never forget it. He said, the kingdom we serve is greater than the role we play. And so the problem is we always want to be the star of the great kingdom, but the reality is the kingdom's bigger than me. And so, what I've got to do is serve the big kingdom. And when I do that, I'm going to experience the life I've always wanted. I need to serve Jesus, not the role. And I think that that's so important, especially as we grow as a church at Sandals, as people lose power, preference, and prestige. They get upset. They go to another church when what's happening is their role is diminishing, but the kingdom is increasing. And so when you become more concerned with your role, you're losing sight of the kingdom. So what I would just say is you are gifted. But the problem is nowadays is we instantaneously can compare ourselves. So think about if I would have preached 100 years ago, I'd have been the greatest preacher I ever heard.
He has to say that.
Do you know
3.
why? Because how are you going to hear another preacher?
Right.
You could read their sermons in the paper, but you couldn't hear them. You know, like my favorite speaker of all time is Abraham Lincoln, and apparently he was terrible, but he wrote well. And so we read his speeches and we're like, oh my gosh, that's why he was so good at writing them, because he stunk at speaking them. So just say, God, I know you have a role for me, and I know that you've gifted me to serve in that role, and trust God's wisdom, and just know that. And I believe you will experience great life. You know, I when I turned 40, how old are you?
38.
38. So when I was 2 years older than Andrew, almost a decade ago, I had to bury what I thought my life would be. I literally just said, God, man, my life did not turn out the way that I thought it would. And I just was so frustrated with my career. And when I buried it, that's when God blessed it. And that is the secret to success. Bury your desires and God will bless the new ones.
Go.
Good.
I'll go. Sorry, Andrew and is it Alec?
Alex.
Alex. I can identify so much with regret. I can look back and see so many opportunities that I did not do because I was afraid I wouldn't do them well. One thing I think sixes struggle with is being afraid to be a beginner at something or not be the best at it because we're just afraid because we're afraid of everything. But I now try to use that regret because I have so much regret. I use it as my motivator. I've kind of made it work for me of when I'm on the edge of saying no to something to remember the regret that I have from saying no to so many things in the past that I wish I would have said yes to or that I missed out on. And so to just moving forward, let that regret be a reminder to pursue the courage to do the things that come up for them because they can, it will empower him. It can empower him now.
Right. So I think, Alex, the courage is not the absence of fear. It's pressing on in the midst of fear. And so, the verse Matt said is forgetting the past and then pressing on. You have to move forward. Otherwise, you get stuck in your head and you get stuck in all the what ifs and all that. But you actually have to do something. And it's just moving forward because God will meet you in that. It's not always fixed before you take that step forward, which is what we typically want is the safety of, I want to see the path ahead. And like anything in faith, we have to take those steps first.
Right.
And then God meets you on the path.
Okay, I got two questions that are both pretty tough, and they're similar. I'm going to group them together because I think we can speak to both of them.
So you're going to take two hard conversations and make them one really hard conversation.
What I'm saying is I believe in all three of you. We got PMB, we got Pastor Andrew the Ox, and then the legend T Breezy in the house. Here it comes. The first one was from MJ. These are both a little long, but I'm going to hit you with them. In all honesty, I was very disappointed to discover that I was a 6. I feel as though I am forever scarred by my upbringing. How much does your family of origin influence your results, specifically as a 6? As a kid, I suffered greatly at the hands of the adults in my life who were supposed to care for me. I've worked very hard in years of counseling to be more than my beginning, but life has taught me that some people are not trustworthy. This next one came in anonymously. I feel like I value safety because I grew up in a very broken home filled with neglect, abuse, and addiction. As a little girl, I had to learn to be resilient and defend for myself. I've worked so hard in years of counseling to rise above my beginning and not let it hamper my present and future. I guess my question is, did God create me as a 6 or did I become a 6 out of self-preservation? So two very similar questions
so
with a lot of wounding.
Yeah, the answer is easy to both questions. You were a 6. Now, what you've done, regardless of what happened to you in childhood, because Andrew does not have that story. Now, he just like Andrew was influenced by the worry of his mother, they have been influenced by their family of origin, and they've had to adapt as 6s. And so their fear that's healthy, reverence, right, holiness, awe, that has moved into an aggressive, exaggerated state because of their childhood. And so they've had to adapt to not trust people, not believe people. And so, yes, your upbringing has severely affected what I would say is your scores if you take the test. And so your scores are going to show the abuse, show the unhealth. That's where that's going to be revealed. But again, that's why I picked the Apostle Peter. He's the most important disciple Jesus makes, and he's a 6. And we need to celebrate in that, and we need to rejoice in that. Peter is great, absolutely incredible, even though his core struggle is fear. And so God can use any of the numbers to do great things because he's God. That's just the reality. And so I just would encourage all of you, don't be embarrassed or ashamed by any of your scores. They're absolutely beautiful, amazing things. Not your scores, but your numbers. And your scores are just telling you the way that you see yourself right now. And we're going to try to change that and change the way you behave as you grow up in Christ. So my heart goes out to both of you. Those are just sad tales of the brokenness and the selfishness of parents. And unfortunately, that has tragic implications for kids.
I would say I actually identify with those stories, both of those situations so much, which I think is why my unhealthy scores are so exaggerated. I'm like 99.9 healthy and unhealthy. I did have a pretty chaotic, traumatic childhood in a similar fashion, which, all of us, no matter what your style, when you're young, you're having to figure out how to be safe, secure, loved without even consciously thinking that. We're all developing strategies for how to figure that out. So I think that, yes, you probably would still be a 6. What's happening is the broken parts of the 6 have become your primary strategy of just focusing on everything that can go wrong, because a lot has gone wrong. And you saw from a really early age, you were awakened, the door opened, saw behind the curtain, if you will, all the things that could go wrong, and they did. And so that's kind of your skew. What I would recommend to do at this point, and it's one of the things that's really been helping me, because that was me, is just to say, but that's not all I am. Like, yes, a lot can go wrong, but what can go right? I do keep this chalkboard. Matt kind of mentioned it this weekend in the message, but I keep this chalkboard in our house that says, so far, you've survived 100% of your bad days. And I think that's true. I've had some really bad days and I've survived them. I've had to figure out some strategies for when I was young to survive them. Some of those were keeping people out, not trusting people. However, one of the things that's helping me get healthier is to realize that the strategies I had then are to keep people out, to always preserve myself and keep myself safe, is actually now, as a mid 40-year-old, it's actually not protecting me. It's harming me, because I'm keeping people out. And so some of those strategies need to be left where they were. They helped you then. They're not helping you now. And so you needed them. You were in chaos. You don't need them now. Right. And so that's one of the ways to the health, but to also begin to embrace of, all of that aside, what are the beautiful parts of this that God's given me, because there are things you're doing you're not even thinking about doing. How do you do that? How are you an advocate for seeing things that are at risk and being a good planner and protector and all of those kind of things? So, to not just cling to the broken parts of the 6, but to start to press into the beauty. And then also to look at some of your other high scores on there, healthy scores. Yeah. Because you're not just a 6. I mean, we're primarily a 6, but you have some other beautiful things too. So to look at yourself as more than just that, and to ask yourself what could go right instead of always what could go wrong.
Yeah, and it's redefining where you find security. Security isn't found in ourselves, so we don't become these fully realized people that now we've found security in myself. We always find it in Christ, so he's the only secure thing in this broken, messed up world. And so, bringing all those broken pieces to him is where you gain security over time, and bringing that to community and experiencing safe people that will love you for who you are and provide some of that stability that you lacked in childhood will be an example of who God is, because they're displaying his love and grace and kindness.
You just made me think of this, but I've actually had to figure out thinking processes for myself to deal with the fear that I have. And it used to be 7 steps to we're all going to die. Well, if this goes wrong, then this goes wrong, then this goes wrong, and then this goes wrong. And I've had to work through that so much to well, what if we do fly to Australia and the plane crashes? I mean, because I was that's a long flight. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Had I said no, I would have never got to have one of the best experiences of my life with my family. But I had to get through okay, so what if I do die? Then I'm in the presence of God. And so my worst case scenario still ends up in the presence of God. Then I get on that plane and I go, so like you said, we don't find our security in ourselves. Most of our worst case scenario is dying or death. So just me? No, just all of us sixes unite.
No, I think about it.
Our what if is still such a great answer. We're in the presence of God, even if that happens. So just constantly bringing that back to God. So that's why I love you said
what
that.
Tammy said, about the strategies as a child were successful, but they can now keep you from true success. And that's just so important. So just understand that, times have changed and the people that you needed to be the most safe in your life early on were not. But I can tell you, most people are safe. That's just the reality. We live in this world where we think, we're all going to get kidnapped, and, my wife especially, right? It's going to happen at any moment.
Sorry,
but the reality is that just doesn't happen that often. That's why it's in the news. So we have to establish new relationships. And I think about 3 women and specifically, sorry, Andrew, I don't have a good example for a guy who's a 6, but 3 women who've experienced, great suffering. And, one of them had an unwanted sexual encounter with a pastor. And so we've had to build safe relationships together. We actually work together now. And so, right, not all pastors are pervs. That's just the reality. Matter of fact, the vast majority of them are not. I think about another good friend of Tammy and ours and mine who was, sex trafficked at the age of 12. So the people that were supposed to keep her safe, supposed to love her, on her 12th birthday, she became a prostitute for her mom and the man in her life's prophet, right? So I think about another person, a friend of mine that we actually all know whose father was in a cult, a sexual cult, and used his daughter for their sexual rituals. And I think about all of that. And I remember specifically one day in group when we're no longer in group together, the 3 of us, not me and you, PRD, but the 3 of us are in group together. And one of the gals who was abused introduced me to her son, and she said, "This is Pastor Matt, and he is safe." And it's important to be declarative. It's important to rightly label safe people and to be able to discern who that is. And so, and to be around them and not leave them. That's where your loyalty, when you find a safe person and you find a safe leader, never leave them, because not all leaders are safe. I wish they were. Not all leaders are in it for the benefit of others. Oftentimes it's to mask their own brokenness. And so find those people that you can trust, that are real, that are safe. And the way that you discover who is safe is by interactions with people over time. Don't instantaneously trust someone because of their position. Trust them over time, watch them over time. How have they handled things? What have they done? Like, that's the best way to find someone that is safe. And that's so important as a 6, is that you have safe, secure people in your life that speak the truth. And again, that's how we love 6s, is we're secure, we're safe, and we speak the truth.
One of the things about a 6 that I think is so important to say is the 6 is like the loyalist or the loyal person. More often than not, I think 6s, because we value loyalty so much, we naturally tend to be loyal to other people, that we need to be as loyal to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so even to some of those questions of, people have let me down, or they weren't loyal to me when I was loyal to them. Part of being loyal to yourself, that's what that looks like, is saying, I value me and I'm worth it and I deserve it. And I don't, not surrounding yourself with people who are just unstable all the time. Our coaches actually had told us, like, Tammy, you cannot be close friends. Not that you can't be friends. Your closest people have to be people living fully awake. Mm-hmm. And what they meant by that is people that can be real with their stuff, people that you can be real with your stuff, people that can just be real, because those are the safest for you. When people lie, it makes everything for me feel unstable. And so, but part of being loyal to myself is making those hard decisions of like, okay, this person just always feels unsafe for me. Instead of me killing myself to be loyal to them, to have good boundaries there, because it's also important for me. Otherwise, I'm a hot mess all the time. When everyone around me is unstable, then I just tank. So the loyalty needs to be something you are to others, but not that you don't ever have for yourself.
Yeah.
That's good.
I want to ask you about your relationship with God as a 6, but I've got one last question here. One of the things I sense kind of in all of these questions is a theme, and then even in my experience with people who would probably identify as 6s, is a little bit of a struggle to give grace to your own self. Those last 2 questions, I was thinking, hey, you picked up those tools of being a 6, like in ways that you had to be proactive when you were a kid and you didn't understand how these things were going on. You got to give yourself some grace from that. Yeah. How do you guys cultivate or just give grace to your own self for who you are?
Yeah, it was a journey. I think it took me a long time, even coming to sandals in my early 20s. I didn't really know how to do that. I'd never deeply experienced the grace of God because I always feared I was messing up, that I wasn't maybe good enough, and that God was really disappointed with me deep down. And so understanding how deep the love of God goes, how powerful the cross was, really helped me as I meditated on those things and really dove deep into them to know that grace is available for even me, And hearing the stories of people who have lived broken lives and experienced God's grace really helped me to go, yeah, I'm just as broken and I need that same kind of grace. Even though I try and protect myself from all those bad situations, like I desperately need God's grace. And one of the things that helped me early on, I heard a message where they talked about not receiving God's grace as the sin of unbelief. And I never heard it put that way before, that I was sinning and not believing that God could have grace for me.
And you were afraid of that sin, so you wanted
Right,
some.
yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I love that. So much of that is true for me. I think the language I would use is a tiny bit different, but of just always afraid that I'm just a disappointment to God and having to proactively remind myself that He's for me and not against me. That He sees not just my flaws, but He sees the beauty in me too, because, we're afraid that we're doing it all wrong and we're never good. We're afraid we're never good enough. We're never getting it right. We're never enough. The fear of that is so much, but to remember that grace and that, He made us and that He loves us. And the fear of just like the punishment or the risk of getting it wrong, to not let that outweigh the grace.
Yeah, there's a scripture that says perfect love casts out all fear. I think you shared it this weekend. And I experienced the same thing, Tammy. I remember being unsettled in my faith several times over the years. And when I'd sit down and pray and finally discover what it was, is I was not believing the love of God. I wasn't receiving it from Him. And once I did, the fear would go. I wouldn't feel afraid of the consequences or maybe God doesn't love me enough, but it really settled me. And so, just an ongoing process.
Something Lindy did this, she's been doing more and more of, and she actually did, even on Sunday afternoon, when we were kind of having this relational disconnect, she actually stopped and said, hey, I'm afraid of this, if this is going to happen, and all those other things. And her just communicating in that moment really forced me to pause, take a record of where she was, get down on my knees so that I could really try and talk to her. But then also, when she pushed into what she was afraid of, allowed me to come alongside and celebrate and say, hey, I see that as courage. And I would have been 100% blind to that as her husband if she didn't tell me. So one of the things, I love how you guys have been really honest and open about that. Hopefully other sixes that are listening can learn from Tammy and Andrew, their willingness to accept, this is who I am. The beauty and brokenness has been, I think, is empowering you to communicate that in relationships, which allows the rest of us who don't think that way to see and celebrate you. So really quick, last question. What does it look like being real with God as a 6? Struggles, challenges, beauty, all that stuff. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that I don't have to be afraid. I mean, Tammy kind of alluded to it, that God is for us. And that idea is really hard to believe when you're afraid you're not good enough, or you're afraid God doesn't love you, afraid that He's going to leave you hanging in your worst moment.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And learning the character of God through Scripture, through the experience of safe, great people, it's really helped me to just receive that, man, God's with me. He's for me. He wants great things for me, and I don't have to be afraid. And like Tammy said, the worst that can happen is I die and go to heaven, right? I mean, literally, and I've actually identified with that. I've had that thought many times. I've chased the rabbit down the hole and gone, what's the worst that can happen? If everything goes wrong that I think can go wrong, it's not the worst thing ever. And so just coming to rest in that, knowing that God's a good God. He cares for His people, and He knows how to do that well, way better than we can.
Yeah, I would say that same thing of just trusting God. I mean, the Loyalist style, the 6 style values truth and trust. So there's so much weight put on that. And so trusting that God is who He says He is, trusting that His word is good, trusting that His ways are good. Amen. I mean, the at-risk assessment, if you will, is so funny to me when I look at people that are just going crazy, doing all the things or whatever, or when they make the argument to me of, well, God's just keeping you from everything fun. And that's just not even how my brain works. I'm like, no, He's keeping us safe from all the bad things that could happen to us. And so just the trusting God that He is good is the best way to be real with Him, and valuing His truth, that it's good for us, and that it is because our safety and our security is at he has our best interest at heart when it comes to that. So
Yeah, and that's huge. I remember just being excited to learn why God said the things that he did, because like you said, he has our best interest in mind. He tells us to not have sex before we're married because he knows it's better for us.
Yeah.
That sex will
Not
be
that
better
he's
later.
trying to keep us from like all the great sex everywhere we could be having.
Right. And all throughout the Old Testament, even a lot of the dietary laws he put on the Jews were for their health. And I mean, everything God does is for our benefit, and yet we think he's trying to restrict us. And so
And he's already done the at-risk assessment for us.
right. Ooh,
You
that's
know?
good. Ring that thing.
Bad shrimp, dude's taking out a lot of people.
All
Okay,
right,
wait, hold on, real quick. I just feel like Tammy needs to end the show with a slight confession about how she asked me in the Pacific Ocean to leave her for dead.
I
Go ahead.
lost my mind that day.
That was so great.
And I did say, just leave me. Just go. Just go.
My wife told me to
I-
leave her to die in the Pacific Ocean.
You're
That would be
basically the
horrible for
opposite.
you.
I lost my mind.
You're like basically the opposite of that girl in Titanic. I'll never let go, Jack. You just like, let me go.
Jack.
Let me go, Jack.
Jack, save yourself.
Dude, fear is a real thing, man.
Yeah.
Man, I was like,
But you know what? I'll say this, like, just understanding it has actually made Matt and I's relationship so much better because he doesn't live by the what if, and he has very little fear of anything except failing. And so he should just
which leaving your wife for dead in
It's a
the
failure.
ocean
It's a
would
failure.
count as
thank God
failure.
that he's but even in our marriage, it's been so helpful for him to go like telling me just stop being afraid, just calm down, just don't worry, just whatever. It's like asking me to hold my breath indefinitely, and it just doesn't work. So now we talk through the fears, or he helps take some of the risk on for him, or even just being able to speak it. Like it's become kind of funny how much now I will say like, watch me to my car because I'm gonna be
Yeah, and so I just
kidnapped,
walk her
raped,
to her
or
car
beaten.
because she's gonna
You know,
get
like-
raped in the church parking lot. So
It could happen.
yeah, and let me just say this: is
yeah.
I think in a lot of marriages, and I know I did this early on. I would say you're being ridiculous, and the truth is we're all ridiculous in
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah, and I
Did
would
you
say
just
that
get convicted?
I would
Oh my
say
gosh.
that to Matt
Justin
so many
Party's ready to
times.
give his life to Christ.
When he
Confess.
was like, "Our church isn't good," that sucked. I'm like, "You're ridiculous."
Yeah.
Saying you're ridiculous to someone's style is ridiculous. We all have them and have the different ways that we're motivated and the different things we're afraid of, and everyone matters. And telling someone not to be who they are is like asking them to hold their breath. And that's why I want everyone for every style to think is to stop wishing you weren't what you are. Instead, embrace the beauty that you bring to the mosaic of humanity and work on the brokenness so you're not spending as much time there. And that's not what you're bringing to the table because it's not good for you. To pursue being the healthiest version of yourself is what I want for people through the Enneagram
That was great.
and for myself.
You guys are awesome. Thank you for being on the show. My favorite moment of this whole show, I don't think anyone will have noticed it, but I have a great view of both you guys. And about 20 minutes ago, that helicopter that flew by, did you guys hear that? This helicopter flew by. Your guys' bodies noticed it because I saw both of you. The helicopter sound flew by and you both your eyes were like
They were
this.
like, we're gonna die.
Yeah, you scanned the
I
room.
didn't hear it.
Oh,
I didn't know what it was, but I just
Your
heard something.
lizard
So I was
brain
like,
heard it. And you were like, Kim Jong-un couldn't get a rocket to work. And they're dropping the bomb with a helicopter. It was awesome.